When former President Duterte got elected as the Philippines president in 2016, he sought a change to the entire country, namely infrastructure and foreign policy. These two factors, however, were very intertwined with one another. A nation could easily increase its relationship with another country by inviting that country to give them loans and even provide technical cooperation to build infrastructure. This is where former President Duterte comes in, a leader that wanted help from China. Hence, when he went on a 4-day visit to the mainland, he came home announcing arguably one of the largest ever investment pledges in the country's history, a whopping $24 billion worth of funding and investments. These were in more detail: $9 billion into soft loans, $3 billion worth of credit from the Bank of China, and other economic deals valued at $15 billion. Many would go on to praise his visit to the country, but some have cited this Chinese money due to its relation with debt diplomacy and unknown territories that led to the demise of some nations, as the media claims. And despite his proud intuition to finally bringing the Philippines into a so-called golden age of infrastructure led by domestic and international investments, much of what Chinese have promised on their side has never actually transpired. You see, after 6 years since he went on to visit China and brought in investments and funding, much of these never came to fruition. In fact, only a tiny amount of it was actually dispersed. The latest data published by the National Economic and Development Authority of the Philippines saw that the cumulative official development assistance of the country amounted to over $29 billion, of which only saw $493 million coming from China, which amounted to just 5 projects. Compare that to Japan's investments, which amounted to over $11 billion. This brings us to the question of today's video. Has China failed to fulfill its promise to the Philippines? Or rather, has China fooled the Philippines into making it think that it will actually invest in the country? Well, here's the thing about Chinese investments not being delivered. There are 2 barriers that the Philippines faced during those 6 years. The first being due to territorial disputes, and the second being time. Let us discuss these 2 in more detail. The Philippines and China could have had a great relationship with one another had it not been for small islands off the coast of the West Philippine Sea, also claimed to be known as the South China Sea. The disputes are about the islands being owned by China. This brought in the case known as the Philippines versus China, which fought over the ownership of those islands and seas. In the end, however, the Philippines won the case. This is arguably the single reason why trust between the 2 nations deteriorated. The greed of China knows no bounds, as some claim, with increasing social pressure on the government. It also meant that former President Duterte's acts towards China would also be limited. He needed the people to agree with this matter, and while there were times that he crossed the trust of the Philippine people, he still stayed at the limit to where he could voice more Chinese money. But here's the thing, while the territorial dispute may have caused disarray amongst the people, what really resulted in all of these is just a short-term impact. This brings us to the next factor: time. Soon after President Duterte had left office in 2022 and the new President Marcos had come into play, Chinese-led projects that were once promised had slowly come to light. For instance, one of the largest promised projects were the Tagum-Davao-Divos-Mindanao Railway and the Subic-Clark Railway project. These 2 notable railway projects were amongst the largest not only as a project from China but across the entire history of the Philippines. The loans negotiation, which was delayed and withdrawn for 6 years, is now expected to be finalized by the initial months of 2023. And if everything does go properly as planned, does it mean that maybe it was Duterte's failure to act on the project? Or maybe China could have been waiting for his exit. Even for another hypothetical question, is that maybe this will also be delayed? Well, here's where time comes into play. While China has indeed promised billions of dollars worth of investments, what really matters in the end is time. Because as time goes by, in the long run of things, China would eventually jump the boat and do what it had initially promised to do: invest. We can simply see this in the unbeknown projects of things. Those smaller projects that had come to fruition were the likes of Binondo Intramuros Bridge, the Estrella Pantaleon Bridge, and a few more. Although everything was late and slow, they still slowly, one by one, came into being. Why? Because time was of the essence, and the country needed to look in the long run of things. A report published by Fitch Solutions, one of America's big 3 credit rating agencies, and regarded as one of the world's best sources for investment scale, said that the dominance of Japanese-led fundings would slowly erode over time, and China would eventually play a greater role in project financing. The report attributed it because of the Belt and Road Initiative that both China and the Philippines are continuously seeking to adopt, and also due to Duterte relationship building. Therefore, as time goes by, Chinese-led project funding would rise, and we would eventually see much of these take into effect probably in the coming years. While the report we stated so far is not proven, since China has still not really in fact acted, it should still be in everyone's mind that China would eventually become the single largest economy in the entire world. By being a superpower, it means that their international presence is going to rapidly increase, just as how the United States is doing right now, and how the United Kingdom was way back. Finally, to answer one of the largest questions consistently raised for Chinese-led debts is that they are expensive and interest-wise risky. The average Chinese loan interest is between 2 to 3%, while Japanese loan interest was between 0.25 to 0.75%. Therefore, would it not be easy to say that the Philippines should just lean over to Japan? Well, here's the thing. There is a maximum amount of loans that Japan can give to the Philippines. For instance, the report published earlier by National Economic and Development Agency found that over $11 billion were dispersed from Japan to the Philippines. However, $11 billion is already massive. Because Japan is not only an active investor in the Philippines, but it is also a massive investor in the entire world. Japan can't invest every single dollar it has just in the Philippines alone, and this concept also applies to the country's received investment. The Philippines cannot simply rely on Japan for everything. Therefore, the reason why China is being sought after is that they can provide similar or even higher amounts of loans. Furthermore, what people often don't understand is that Chinese loans by interest rate during those years of negotiation were even lower than the commercial average, meaning it simply made perfect sense that China could provide loans because Japan could not finance everything, and also because they were still the better alternative other than using commercial loans. Now, everything from what we said today could still change. The future is uncertain after all. For example, we are now slowly seeing a huge collapse in some of China's most prominent industries such as technology and real estate. But since these are just short term, do you think that China has failed its own promise to the Philippines, or could we just give them more time? Delays, after all, are well evident everywhere. It is also in fact not only in the Philippines that Chinese-led projects face delays, but across the world. Much of that reason is that projects, especially those led by China, are both expensive, and China's foreign affairs are not as adequate and picked up as those of Western nations. But do let us know what you think about these so far, as Filipinos need to understand that eventually China would become a global economic superpower, and their reign in international affairs would be evidently large. Moreover, a report was even published by data provider Refinitiv, which saw the total value of all Belt and Road Initiative projects to be over $4 trillion. In comparison, investments made from 2013 to 2018 only totaled around $500 billion, as reported by the World Bank, indicating that the growth in all of these substantially increased in value. But anyway, thanks for watching.